Hey, welcome everybody, Samo here. This is my ultimate PC build I did.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Samo.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, why I did it, and what's all inside this thing here. So as I go along, I'll show you some of the stuff. Reason why I did it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I tried launching a YouTube channel with very little success. Had a few followers, but the thing that kind of deterred me and discouraged me was the fact that it took me forever to render some videos that I was doing on my old laptop. Granted, it wasn't a bad laptop. It had an Intel i7 processor, had a NVIDIA 920, I think, video card built into it, and 16 gigs of RAM. But it just wasn't up to the task I was asking it to do, and for a 20-minute video, I think it took me like an hour or two to render the video, and I don't want to be sitting there waiting for the computer to render a video and stuff like that. I just kind of gave up on it for a little while, and just let it be. Now I'll jump ahead here a few years later, got a little cash in the bank, working full time and stuff, and decided I'm going to get back into video editing, but I'm going to need a new PC, one that can handle what I'm going to do. And so I decided to build one myself. Now I've built computers before in the past myself, 20 years ago and stuff. And when I jumped into building this one, I had to actually get some help because technology has changed so much from 20 years ago when I last built one. I had to go on YouTube and watch some videos from Gamers Nexus, it's called, and Linus Tech Tips. That helped me get pretty much up to date on all the latest technology, kind of what to look for as far as processors and power and speed and RAM and hard drives and all that stuff. And I was surprised at how much the technology has changed. Some of the stuff 20 years ago was just starting to come out when I built my last computer. And some of the stuff is just brand new, out of nowhere. Can't believe just the technology. So, with that said, I'm going to start with the CPU on this thing. I was originally going to go with the Intel 9900K unlocked, but after watching a few of the videos and what they had to say with their benchmark testing they did on them, for what I was going to be doing with this computer, the AMD 3950X processor was a little bit better suited to my needs, so I actually switched to that and actually saved a little bit of money because I think the Intel was like $1,000 at the time, and the AMD processor there was a couple $100 less, and I got more processing power to boot, so can't argue with that. Also with the CPU, the AMD 3950X, it recommended water cooling. So I did do some water cooling on it. I'll show you that here. I'll take this top off here and pop off the side. Here. One more little screw. Pops off there. I'll set that right there. And pop off this glass panel here. Set that off to the side. Rock around the front here. I opted for a closed loop cooler, they call it, or AIO all-in-one. Right here is the CPU water cooler, and the CPU is underneath there. It's got a few hoses, runs up to a radiator up here with some fans flowing through it to help keep the CPU cool. Which, back when I was when I built my computer 20 years ago, water cooling was just on the verge, just starting out. It was just a new thing people were starting to do. They have come a long way since then. Back then, I was worried about a lot of water leaks and stuff like that. And now companies are actually building closed loop systems and open loop systems where you can customize all the tubing yourself if you want. I didn't feel like going through all that work of doing an open loop, so I just went with a simple closed loop setup. Works great for me. After the CPU, I decided on that I had to focus on what type of motherboard I wanted. It just came out when I was doing this, came out the X570 boards, which are recommended for the CPU. They didn't have the B540 boards. If you guys aren't familiar with motherboards and stuff like that, if you buy a CPU, you need a certain model of motherboard to match the CPU. So I decided to go with the X570 motherboard. I actually went with a Gigabyte Aurora's Extreme motherboard. Pretty expensive motherboard, built like a brick, or a tank if you want to say. Thing must weigh about 5-10 pounds itself. But the reason I went with that is it had a bunch of features built into it that I was for future proofing and reliability. One of the things that came with is a 10 gigabit LAN, which in the future I might be using that. Came with the newest Wi-Fi standard, Wi-Fi 6, and it came with the cooling solution for a lot of the stuff on their motherboard. I liked how they used heat sinks and heat pipes to do it versus having an active fan on there that could burn out eventually without you knowing it. So I liked how they had their setup. They have something on there called VRMs, and doing research on motherboards. They actually did overkill on the VRMs, so they should never get really too warm. I have to worry about thermals on them or anything like that. Also for future proofing, if AMD comes out with a newer CPU that fits the socket in here, should be just a quick BIOS update on the motherboard, hopefully, and I can put that new CPU in and have it instantly upgraded right away. Also, one of the things I liked about this motherboard was its support for PCI Gen 4. All the slots right in here are PCI Gen 4. I believe they want 16 lane, 8 lane, and 4 lane in the setup, but it's all PCI Gen 4. What that means is very high throughputs to the CPU and the memory on there. Another reason I also went with this board is in the future, if I ever want to try overclocking the chip, making it go faster than recommended settings, this motherboard allows me to do that a lot easier than some of the other less expensive motherboards, especially with the extra VRM support on there. After that, I focused on RAM. And watching a few videos for, what the best type of RAM to get for it. Most of them said DDR4, clock speed, can do 3200 megahertz, or hertz, I believe, or 36 or 4000, but they said 3600 hertz was the sweet spot for this, so I went with the 36 DDR4 3600 hertz RAM on this, and I went with 128 gigs of it. Now, some of you may be saying, why in the world do you need 128 gigs of RAM? Well, I remember from back in the early 80s when I first started messing with computers, there was a system called MS-DOS. And back then, they said, you should never need any more than 640K of RAM. Well, nowadays, most computer programs recommend a bare minimum of 4 gigs of RAM. 8 suggested, 16 preferred, and 32 gigs being optimal to run most programs and games and stuff like that. Now, with that being in mind, I also know that with video editing, some of the files can get pretty large. So when I start going into like 4K or 8K video editing, if I ever go there, this all the RAM on here and the processor should be able to handle that without skipping a beat. So just for future proofing measures, that's why I went with 128 gigs. I could have cut the cost of this build significantly if I went with just like 32 gigs or 64, but I want to make sure that, in the future, this computer should last me a good 5 to 6 years, easy. With the overclocking stuff on here, I can maybe be able to squeak 7 years out of it before I have to do another major upgrade. So after that, the RAM and stuff, looked at storage. What did I want to do for storage? Well, they came out with these new things called NVMe M.2 drives. If you see them, they're really no bigger than a USB thumb drive, oversized USB thumb drive. They're really skinny and really flat, and they're about 120 millimeters long. And you can get up to 2 terabytes of storage. and that's actually in here running the operating system and storage right now. I'd like to show it to you, but it's actually, I'll show you where it's at. It's in a little slot underneath this video card here. Doesn't take up much space at all. Hardly anything. Super fast. I was doing some transfers off of thumb drive from my laptop to this computer. 7 gig file worth of files took about 15-20 minutes to transfer from the laptop to the thumb drive. I put in this new computer. That same 7 gigs took about 60 seconds, or a little under a minute, to transfer from the thumb drive to this computer. I was just blown away. That's just super fast. So after the hard drive and stuff, I started looking at power supplies. According to a PC parts builder, about a 600 watt power supply would be minimum recommended for this. From working in a DJing field and stuff like that, I know having more overhead for headroom is better. So I put in a 1,000 watt power supply in here. It's a little overkill, but I'd rather have a little extra power and not need it than to have too little power and need it. Because in a DJ world, that's how you blow speakers. If you don't have enough power and you try to push something way too hard. So just for reliability standpoint, future proofing, that's why I want the 1,000 watt power supply. Next comes up the two hardest choices that took me forever to finally decide on. This whole build took me about 4 months, was sorting out parts and doing research and stuff like this. Start with the first one, that's the case. This is a Leon Lee 10 1000D XL 011 Dynamic XL. The reason I went with this case is for its cooling characteristics. I was looking at a couple other cases. One was a Corsair Obsidian 1000D, which at the time I was looking at was about $500. I think it's gone up to about $700 or $800 now. And I just didn't feel like spending $500 on a computer case. Plus, I seen some builds in there where they put just a basic setup like this in there, and it looked like wasn't proportionate. It was just a little dot inside a super huge case. Didn't give the aesthetic I was kind of looking for either. This one, according to some of the YouTube videos I saw, this gave the Leon Lee case gave the best thermals for keeping everything cool inside. Plus, it's got a kind of a nice aesthetic glass case. I did also look at, what was it? See if I can find my notes here. Thermal take case. But those look like a modified pizza warmer I see at a gas station. I just really didn't care for the looks or aesthetics of them either. So eventually I decided on this. This is about a $200 case, plus or minus depending on sales and stuff when you find it. After that, I decided on the case. The next thing was a video card. The video card took kind of almost all of 4 months to decide, because there's so many options out there from NVIDIA and AMD, and they're supposed to be both coming out with new video cards later this year. They were supposed to be out early this year, but with what's going on in the world nowadays, kind of got pushed off till later this, probably fall they'll be coming out with. So I wasn't going to wait till fall to get a new video card, so I kind of was doing some research. I was going back and forth between a Titan RTX or a 2080 RTX Ti. And going back and forth between the two. I didn't want to really spend a $2,500 for a Titan RTX. Even though this is an all-out build, that was still a little too rich for my blood. I did finally find a compromise. EGVA came out with they call a Kingpin Edition RTX 2080 Ti. Now, Kingpin Edition is there's a guy out there in the computer world called Kingpin, and he specializes in overclocking stuff, And they worked with him on this video card, so yeah, it is slightly overclocked from a stock 2080. You can overclock it even more if you want to, but the reason I decided on this card is it gave relative performance was almost same or similar to a Titan card, but it cost quite a bit less. Plus, this one came with an AIO or CLC cooler built into it. Another bonus, help keeping everything cool. So I decided on getting that one. I figured it was a good compromise. I was getting not similar performance to a Titan, but without the price tag. After that, some other cooling stuff in here. I did put four Noctua 3000 RPM fans in here. I run them at about 1800 RPM. I don't mind the noise too much. To me, it's kind of soothing. I was one of them people that always had to have a fan in the bedroom, even in the middle of winter, just for the noise to help go to sleep. Then, as far as future upgrades for this, about the only thing I'm going to really do is maybe add more storage space to it eventually along the line. I'll probably get another NVMe.2 drive along with a couple SSDs, and this does have a bay in the back for hot swappable old-fashioned hard drives. So I might get one of those just for mass storage of old projects that won't be relevant anymore, so I can move them over there and keep the other drives free of space. As far as monitor I chose, I went with an LG 34-inch curved monitor. I love it so far. I've been using it. It's pretty good. I'm still getting used to having a curved monitor and a 34-inch one. So used to having 17-inch monitors or 24-inch at my work where I work at. It's the biggest they usually go. So this 34-inch took a little getting used to, but I love it having two full windows open at a time. I'm thinking about adding another monitor and stacking on top of each other. So that's an upgrade for that. As far as where I got the parts from, I got most of the parts from either Newegg or Micro Center. With the exception of the monitor, I got that from Computer Discount Warehouse or CDW. I'm not an Amazon fan, so I like to support the smaller retailers, and Amazon's just too big box for me. Only time I get stuff from Amazon if it's an item that I cannot absolutely find anywhere else. Which some of the DJ stuff I had to use Amazon for some of it because that was the only place where they had them on market. So thanks for watching this video. I'll probably be doing some more. I'm going to be focusing this channel more on country stuff and what people like to do out in the country, including some of the tech stuff we have and grilling and maybe going out to the lake, shooting a few videos out there. Once again, thank you. I am Samo, or Minnesota's DJ Samo, depending on how you know me. Have a good day.